He knew what was coming. Gary Sinigi was a pussycat compared to me, Thomas Pierce said. I'm Mr. Smith.
Sampson and I rushed through Princeton, breaking just about every speed limit. The agents trailing Thomas Pierce had temporarily lost him. They thought they had him again at Simon Conklin's. Everything was chaos. Moments after we arrived, Kyle gave the signal to move in on the house. A half-dozen FBI agents, Sampson, myself, and Sandra, hurried through the yard. We split up. Some went in the front, and others through the back of the ramshackle house. The living room was darker and gloomier than I remembered from an earlier visit. We didn't see anyone yet, neither Pierce, nor Simon Conklin, nor Mrs. Smith. The house looked as if it had been ransacked, and it smelled terrible. Kyle gave a hand signal, and we fanned out, hurrying through the house. I wanted Pierce to go down, but I wanted to get Simon Conklin even more. Conklin had come into my house and attacked my family. I needed 5 minutes alone with Conklin. Therapy time, for me. An agent called out, "The basement! Down here, hurry!" I followed the others down the narrow, twisting stairs.
Oh, Jesus!
I heard Kyle say from his position up ahead. I saw Simon Conklin laying spread-eagle across an old, striped blue mattress on the floor. The man who had attacked me and my family had been mutilated. Thanks to countless anatomy classes at Johns Hopkins, I was better prepared than others for the gruesome murder scene. Simon Conklin had no face. A bold incision had been made at the top of his skull. The cut went through the scalp and clear down to the bone. Then the scalp had been pulled down over the front of the face. Conklin's long black hair hung from his scalp to where the chin should have been. It looked like a beard. I suspected that this meant something to Pierce. What did obliterating a face mean to him, if anything? There was an unpainted wooden door in the cellar, another way out, but none of the agents stationed outside had seen him leave. Several agents were trying to chase down Pierce. I stayed inside with the mutilated corpse.
He did this in just a couple of minutes?
Kyle Craig asked.
Alex, could he work this fast?
If he's crazy as I think he is, yeah, he could have. Don't forget, he did this in med school, not to mention his other victims. He has to be incredibly strong, Kyle. He didn't have morgue tools, no electric saws. He used a knife and his hands. I was standing close to the mattress, staring down at what remained of Simon Conklin. I leaned in closer and peered at the remains of Simon Conklin. Why was Thomas Pierce so angry at Conklin? Why had he punished Conklin like this? The basement of the house was eerily quiet. Sandra Greenberg looked pale and was leaning against the cellar wall. He cut away the front quadrant of the skull, I said. He performed a frontal craniotomy. It looks like Thomas Pierce is practicing medicine again. I had known Kyle Craig for 10 years and had been his friend for nearly that long. I had never seen him so troubled and disconsolate about a case before, no matter how difficult or gruesome. The Thomas Pierce investigation had ruined his career, or at least he thought so, and maybe he was right. How the hell does he keep slipping away? I said. We were still in Princeton the next morning, having breakfast at PJ's Pancake House.
That's the worst part of it. He knows everything we would do. He anticipates our actions and procedures. He was one of us. I really messed this up, Alex. I should have taken Pierce in when I had the chance. We talked about it down in Quantico.
You would have had to let him go. Release him in a few hours. Then what would you do? You couldn't keep Pierce under surveillance forever.
Director Burns wanted to sanction Pierce, take him out, but I strongly disagreed. I thought I could get him. I told Burns I would.
I shook my head. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. The director of the FBI approved a sanction on Pierce. Jesus. I had been thinking about the possibility of some kind of abstract or artistic pattern since I'd first heard about the complicated case. I was well aware of the theory that each of the murders was different, and worse, seemed arbitrary. That would make Pierce almost impossible to catch. The more I thought about the series of murders, though, and especially about Thomas Pierce's history, the more I suspected that there had to be a pattern, a mission behind all of this. The FBI had simply missed it. Now I was missing it too.
What do you want to do, Alex? I understand if you're not going to work this one, if you're not up to it.
I thought about my family back home, about Christine Johnson, and the things we talked over, but I didn't see how I could step away from this awful case right now. I was also somewhat afraid of retribution from Pierce. There was no way to predict how he might react now. I'll stay with you for a few days. I'll be around, Kyle. No promises yet. Shit, I hate that I said that. Damn it! I pounded the table and the plates and flatware jumped. For the first time that morning, Kyle offered up half a smile.
So, what's your plan? Tell me what you're going to do.
I shook my head back and forth. I still couldn't believe I was doing this. My plan is as follows. I'm going home to Washington, and that's non-negotiable. Tomorrow or the next day, I'll fly to Boston. I want to see Pierce's apartment. He wanted to see my house, didn't he? Then we'll see, Kyle. Please, keep your evidence gatherers on a leash before I get to his apartment. Look, photograph, but don't move anything around. Mr. Smith is a very orderly man. I want to see how Pierce's place looks, how he arranged it for us. Kyle was back to the deadpan look, super serious, which I actually prefer.
We're not going to get him, Alex. He's been given a warning. He'll be more careful from now on. Maybe he'll disappear, like some killers do, just vanish off the face of the earth.
That would be nice, I said. But, I don't think it's going to happen. There is a pattern, Kyle. We just haven't found it. As they say in the wild, wild West, you have to get right back on the horse that threw you. I spent 2 days back in Washington, but it seemed more like a couple of hours. Everybody was mad at me for getting into the hunt. Nana, the kids, Christine. So be it. I took the first flight into Boston and was at Thomas Pierce's apartment in Cambridge by 9 in the morning. Reluctantly, the Dragon Slayer was back in play. Kyle Craig's original plan to catch Pierce was one of the most audacious ever to come out of the usually conservative Federal Bureau, but it probably had to be. The question now, had Thomas Pierce been able to get out of the Princeton area somehow? Or was he still down there? Had he circled back to Boston, fled to Europe? Nobody knew for sure. It was also possible that we might not hear from Pierce or from Mr. Smith for a long time. There was a pattern. We just had to find it. Pierce and Isabella Calais lived together for 3 years in the second-floor apartment of a townhouse in Cambridge. The front door of the place opened onto the kitchen. Then came a long railroad-style hallway. The apartment was a revelation. There were memories and reminders of Isabella Calais everywhere. It was strange and overwhelming, as if she still lived here and might suddenly appear from one of the rooms. There were photographs of her in every single room. I counted more than 20 pictures of Isabella on my first pass, a quick sightseeing tour of the apartment. How could Pierce bear to have this woman's face everywhere looking at him, staring silently, accusing him of the most unspeakable murder? In the pictures, Isabella Calais has the most beautiful auburn hair, worn long and perfectly shaped. She has a lovely face and the sweetest natural smile. It was easy to see how he could have loved her, but her brown eyes had a far-off look in some of the pictures, as if she weren't quite there. Everything about their apartment made my head spin, my insides too. Was Pierce trying to tell us, or maybe tell himself, that he felt absolutely nothing, no guilt, no sadness, no love in his heart? As I thought about it, I was overwhelmed with sadness myself. I could imagine the torture that must be his life every day. Never to experience real love or deep feelings. In his crazed mind, did Pierce think that by dissecting each of his victims, he would find the answer to himself? Maybe the opposite was true. Was it possible that Pierce needed to feel her presence, to feel everything with the greatest intensity imaginable? Had Thomas Pierce loved Isabella Calais more than he'd thought he was capable of loving anyone? Had Pierce felt redeemed by their love? When he learned of her affair with a doctor named Martin Straw, had it driven him to madness and the most unspeakable acts? The murder of the only person he had ever loved? Why were her pictures still looming everywhere in the apartment? Why had Thomas Pierce been torturing himself with this constant reminder? Isabella Calais was watching me as I moved through every room in the apartment. What was she trying to say? Who is he, Isabella? What is he up to?
Isabella Calais.
I began a more detailed search of the apartment. I paid careful attention not just to Isabella's things, but to Pierce's too. Since both had been students, I wasn't surprised by the academic texts and papers lying about. I found a curious test tube rack of corked vials of sand. Each vial was labeled with the name of a different beach: Laguna, Montauk, Normandy, Parma, Virgin Gorda, Oahu. I thought about the curious notion that Pierce had bottled something so vast, infinite, and random to give it order and substance. So what was his organizing principle for Mr. Smith's murders? What would explain them? There were GT Zaskar mountain bikes stored inside the apartment and 2 GT Machete helmets. Isabella and Thomas biked together through New Hampshire and across into Vermont. More and more, I was sure that he had loved her deeply. Then his love had turned to a hatred so intense, few of us could imagine it. I recalled that the first Cambridge police reports had convincingly described Pierce's grief at the murder scene as impossible to fake. One of the detectives had written, "He is shocked, surprised, utterly heartbroken. Thomas Pierce, not considered a suspect at this time." What else? What else? There had to be a clue here. There had to be a pattern. A framed quote was hung in the hallway. "Without God, we are condemned to be free." Was it Sartre? I thought so. I wondered whose thinking it really represented. Did Pierce take it seriously himself, or was he making a joke? Condemned was a word that interested me. Was Thomas Pierce a condemned man? In the master bedroom, there was a bookcase with a well-preserved 3-volume set of H.L. Mencken's The American Language. It rested on the top shelf. Obviously, this was a prized possession. Maybe it had been a gift. I remembered that Pierce had been a dual major as an undergraduate, biology and philosophy. Philosophy texts were everywhere in the apartment. I read the spines: Jacques Derrida, Foucault, Jean Baudrillard, Heidegger, Habermas, Sartre. There were several dictionaries as well: French, German, English, Italian, and Spanish. A compact 2-volume set of the Oxford English Dictionary had type so small it came with a magnifying glass. There was a framed diagram of the human voice mechanism directly over Pierce's work desk, and a quote: "Language is more than speech." Several books by the linguist and activist Noam Chomsky were on his desk. What I remembered about Chomsky was that he had suggested a complex biological component of language acquisition. He had a view of the mind as a set of mental organs. I think that was Chomsky. I wondered what, if anything, Noam Chomsky or the diagram of the human voice mechanism had to do with Smith, or the death of Isabella Calais. I was lost in my thoughts when I was startled by a loud buzzing noise. It came from the kitchen at the other end of the hall. I thought I was alone in the apartment, and the buzzing spooked me. I took my Glock from its shoulder holder and started down the long, narrow hallway. Then I began to run. I entered the kitchen with my gun in position, and then understood what the buzzing was. I had brought along a power book that Pierce left in his hotel room in Princeton. Left it on purpose? Left it as another clue? A special alarm on the laptop personal computer was the source of the noise. Had he sent a message to us? A fax or a voicemail? Or perhaps someone was sending a message to Pierce. Who would be sending him messages? I checked voicemail first. It was Pierce. His voice was strong and steady and almost soothing. It was the voice of someone in control of himself and the situation. It was eerie under the circumstances to be hearing it alone in his apartment.
Dr. Cross, at least I suspect it's you I've reached. This is the kind of message I used to receive when I was tracking Smith. Of course, I was using the messages for misdirection, sending them myself. I wanted to mislead the police, the FBI. Who knows? Maybe I still do. At any rate, here's your very first message. Anthony Bruno, Brielle, New Jersey. Why don't you come to the seashore and join me for a swim? Have you arrived at any conclusions about Isabella yet? She is